I'd like to call the Joint Housing and Zoning Subcommittee meeting to order. Roll call, please, Mr. Clerk.
From the Housing Committee, Council Yem.
Yes.
Council Drinkwater.
Here.
Council Noon.
Here.
Zoning, Council Leahy.
Here.
All present.
I also like to recognize Councilor who's in the chamber, Councilor Erica Cheers, and Councilor Rita Mercy was here and she stepped out. So let me turn the microphone over to my co-chair, Councilor Drinkwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this meeting tonight is actually continued from a previous meeting where we were discussing a motion that was filed by myself and Councilor Robinson asking to begin a discussion on an ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units within the city of Lowell in order to add additional housing stock and address the housing affordability crisis. At the last meeting of this joint subcommittee, we had a substantial amount of public testimony regarding the idea of accessory dwelling units. And at that meeting, a motion was made and passed by the joint subcommittees to ask the Department of Planning and Development to bring forward a draft ordinance that would allow accessory dwelling units within the city to engage in further discussion in this joint subcommittee. So that draft of an ordinance was presented to the city council and placed on the agenda at the last regular meeting of the council two weeks ago, and was once again referred to this committee for further discussion. So in front of us here tonight, we do have a draft ordinance, and I want to thank Christine McCall, the director of DPD, and the staff within the department for working to create this draft for discussion purposes. I think it's a very good draft which takes into account many of the concerns that were brought forward by residents, and it was the commitment of the members of this joint subcommittee that we would be very methodical and thoughtful about how we move forward with this. Tonight's meeting is really for discussion purposes only and questions as it relates to this draft. And, you know, I do appreciate the thoroughness of it. A couple of the things that are in here, and I'll just mention a couple. You know, parking was one issue that was brought up as a concern for residents. This draft does address that by requiring one additional parking space being added for an accessory dwelling unit. Things like short-term rentals are addressed in here by making clear that you know, neither the primary nor the accessory dwelling would be made available for short-term rentals. So there's a lot to bite off here. I will withhold further comments for now, other than to say that I think this is a great starting point for this conversation. And at this time, I know we do have members of the public here who wish to weigh in and speak, as well as I believe a couple members of the public on Zoom, and I do want to give them the opportunity to speak. But before doing so, I want to turn it back over to my co-chair or members of the subcommittee or members of the council who are present to just either weigh in with thoughts or with any questions. Quickly before doing that, just want to recognize, in addition to the councilors present, we also have present Director of Planning and Development Christine McCall and Building Commissioner David Fuller. So, Mr. Chair, after opening up, we'll go to any other members of the subcommittee.
Thank you so much. And again, I really appreciate the thoroughness of the draft of the ordinance. And I'd like to open up to my colleagues who are in the chambers, give them opportunity to give inputs, ask questions. Mr. Noon, Mr. Leahy, Councilor Leahy, Councilor Noon, and Councilor Kachir. Also, Councilor Mercier, you can chime in, and I know you always have something to say. I know that. Please, you know, ask questions. I do also have questions myself, but I want to open up to my colleagues. Any? Councilor Noon?
Just a quick comment, just from the previous subcommittee meeting, that we have indicated that, first of all, I just want to thank DPD directors, Christian McCall and the commissioner was here. So just like we mentioned before that we asked the DPD directors to draft an ordinance regarding the use of ADU throughout the city of Lowell. I'm glad that we have this draft. This is the first step forward to look at it. One would hope that this would be one of the tools to use to close the gap in housing shortage that we, like many other city and town, facing. However, I urge committee members, all the committee members, for most committee members, to carefully, with considerations of the residents that would have a comment or input with regard to this as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Noon. Councilor Leahy, you have anything to add? Thank you. I just have you have any? I just have a couple questions on the draft. I have been asked that is the ADU only allowed in a single family, because in the Acre and the Highlands there are a lot of multifamily, two-family, things like that, owner occupied, have large garage and barn house that could be converted into an ADU. In that situation like that, will the owner have to file a special permit to convert that detached garage who meet all the criteria of the ADU? So that would be my first question. So.
Thank you, Councilor Yam. To answer your question, for a multi-unit building with a detached garage that they wish to convert, under this ordinance, that would not be allowed. This ADU ordinance is targeted for single-family structures. So it's not just limited to the SSF zoning district, the suburban single-family zoning district. It's applicable to the structure itself. So it would have to be a owner-occupied single-family.
Okay.
So if there was an owner-occupied single-family in the Highlands with a detached garage, they may be eligible through this.
Right.
But depending on the zoning ordinance,
Right.
they may also, depending on, and it also depends on what zoning district they're in.
Right.
But to answer your initial question, a multifamily could not convert a detached garage into an ADU.
Right. Even though in the right zoning, like TMF and TTF.
So so TMF, for those who don't know, is traditional multifamily, and TTF is traditional two-family.
Right.
It all would depend on the situation.
Okay.
The way this ordinance is written, ADUs would not be allowed
Okay.
if it was a multi-unit in the TTF or the TMF. If it was a single family in the TTF and the TMF, they would be applicable under this ordinance. However, if someone came in with a single family in the TMF, the traditional multifamily zoning district, wanting to do an ADU, staff would probably talk to them to see if they were eligible to just add a second unit, which would may be different
Right.
than an ADU.
Okay. All right.
So it all depends on what the single-family homeowner would want to do with their property.
Okay, all right. The other questions that I had would be under if you can look at the ordinance. I look at it, and under 2, section B as in boy, prior to issuance of a building permit, the use restriction shall be recorded at the registry of deeds. Could you explain what that is?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a fairly straightforward and standard ADU requirement of many not multifamilies, of many municipalities,
Okay.
where it is a restriction that's registered against the property that says they have a permit from this current property owner has a permit through the city of Lowell for an ADU.
Right.
And that's really there, so if the property is ever sold or changed hands, that would be another tool for us to ensure that these don't become,
Right, right.
sort of non-conforming multifamilies, that, we want to make sure that this ADU ordinance is a single-family home with a accessory dwelling unit and not converted to a multifamily.
But here in the B section talked about prior to issue a building permit. That means the homeowner has already received approval to have an ADU at the home. Is that what it means?
You know what, that probably should actually read occupancy, not a building permit.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we, obviously, you don't want to have someone record a deed restriction before they've done the work. But I think we wouldn't want to issue an occupancy for that ADU until we knew it was recorded. We'd want proof that that use restriction was filed. So that's actually something we should edit.
Yeah, if you could take a look at that, because here I am, as a homeowner, I said to myself, I would like to make my detached garage into an ADU, and I meet all the requirements, but now I have to go recording. So that's just something that, that need to clarify a little bit, if that can be done, and when we continue to discuss this. The other concern I have would be the size of the ADU. In this draft, it's talked about 350. I'm looking at, in a real estate, two-car garage is about 400 square feet. This is smaller than a two-car garage. In 2018, the data on housing show that the average studio apartment is about 472 to 514 square feet. So I do not know how the draft come up with the 350 square feet. It's not much. If you have a king bed side, it probably take up all of it, and then you need the kitchens and all of that. So it may not be enough for an older couple that want to downsizing and rent their home into another family. So that's just my my comments, and then if we could maybe take a look at that square footage of the ADU. I look at other cities in town; they have 900 square footage, and the town of one of the town had just increased the 900 to 1,000. I believe in Northampton they just voted not too long ago to increase. So that's just something that I would like us to kind of take a look at that and maybe have more discussion on that.
Yes, we can definitely look into the size requirements. We intentionally wanted to put a limit on the ADU because of concerns that residents had about what ADUs could become and the detriment that that would have on the neighborhood. So we really did want to focus on, design. I just wanted to clarify, it might just be awkwardly written, but the accessory dwelling unit shall not be less than 350 square feet. So we're not saying it has to be 350, it just can't be smaller than 350.
Than that. Okay, all right.
But there is another example. We could word it differently, and I
Yes,
think that would
yes.
be clearer.
Okay, Councilor Drinkwater.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Counselor, and I wanted to add something on the same topic. We did get a suggestion from a resident that was something I wanted to bring up. I thought it was a good idea, and actually it was based upon the way that the accessory dwelling unit ordinance was drafted in Salem, which was something I had looked at in researching the potential for such an ordinance in Lowell. And that is to address the essentially the maximum size. There was a maximum size put on the unit at, I think, 900 square feet. And this would address something by, the way that it's currently drafted with essentially a percentage of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. We have some fairly large homes in the city that, by virtue of the percentage factor, could add a fairly large accessory unit. By that measure, I think having some sort of maximum square footage to limit, the potential for very large home, very ADU might make sense, as well as, also going somewhere around, 50% of the primary dwelling. So you may have smaller single-family homes that may be precluded from adding an ADU because they wouldn't have, the square footage under this. But, so I think that just might be an interesting way to look at it, is similar to the way that Salem did. That would limit certainly the size, but also make sure that we're, setting a minimum where this is quality housing. We're not trying to jam people into areas that are too small with no quality of life. So just potentially another way to look at it. I thought it was a good idea.
Ms. McCall, I didn't have a chance to, well, I didn't see the requirement regarding the entrance of the ADU. The entrance of the ADU cannot be, facing the road. It has to be on the side of the house or facing the back, because I've read other cities in town, that's one of the requirements, so that it does not look like it's a multi-family kind of home. So I didn't see that, and so.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, we did not dictate where the front door could be visible from. We're very intentional in this ordinance that we want to make sure that this is truly an accessory. It's not changing the physical look of the single family. When you drive by it, you always want it to be a single family home. Right. We are mindful, though, that, the City of Lowell's housing stock is old, and we want to make it as easy as possible for residents and for staff. There's houses on corner lots. There's houses that exist now that have a porch door that is facing the front street. And I think, including explicit language about not having an entrance could be problematic, just in terms of reviewing a permit. But we can definitely take a look at it to make sure that we're strengthening language so that it's not a second primary entrance. It's clearly a secondary entrance, so that it still looks and feels like a single family home.
Right. Thank you so much. I think that makes a lot of sense. In this draft of the ordinance, there is no mention of that if I have a large basement with enough square footage walkout in my single home, has a walkout and everything. I don't see a language that talked about the ADU as interior of an existing home. Like either basement or the attic that has a proper square footage, exit, second egress, and first egress. And then I don't see the language say, well, the language might be here that say detached. So if I have a garage that more than 350 square footage, that I can convert that with appropriate. Say I have an attached garage, but I have up above the garage, it has enough room that could be converted into an ADU for my single home. Is that something that we can add a language? So there are three components. Is the interior of the house that already has on existing characters that meet everything that ADU ordinance is prescribed, including parking, square footage, and everything. So that can automatically convert, but some other interior that need to add a door, a second egress to it, and things like that. And then the third section that I would like to see that we can add with modification, that like I mentioned, above the garage is pretty good size of a newer home and left or not being used. And I said to myself, I could make this into an ADU because it has all the characteristic of the ADU, things like that. So that's just my observations.
Thank you. That's a fair comment, and we can be more explicit. I think that really comes down to, basement units and attic units really comes down to building code requirements, and so I would defer to the building commissioner on that. I would argue from a zoning perspective that this ordinance would allow that because, it can be subordinate use if you're still meeting all the conditions and you're creating a secondary entrance that doesn't look like a front door. But there are other considerations for basement and attic units that I don't think are necessary to include in an ADU ordinance because the building code would prevail. And I don't know if Commissioner Fuller, you want to add to that?
Thank you for that question. The use of a basement would be predicated on the bedrooms and their having accessible emergency egress out of the bedrooms. So that would have to be considered. And then with attic access, there would have to be either some sort of life safety, whether it's a secondary means of egress out or a fire escape. In any event, the windows for the sleeping units would be required to be of a certain size in the event that someone has to exit out of that property in the case of an emergency.
Okay. My last comments, I feel like I asked all these questions, Ms. McCall and Mr. Fuller. The ordinance only prescribed and talked about the existing structure. So if someone want to get a permit to put an ADU to their single home, would this ordinance allow that? Miss?
This ordinance is intended to allow for the construction of an addition that could be an ADU that wouldn't otherwise meet zoning, to allow, our existing zoning so they could have this ADU.
Right.
There is a provision in here that you could reconfigure an existing detached dwelling as long as that detached dwelling existed prior to this ordinance and complies with
Right,
all other accessory structure zoning requirements in the code.
Okay.
So we did try to be, I think our intention is to create an ordinance that allows a pathway for requests that we get all the time
Right.
for additional living space for
Right.
friends, family members,
Right.
but also recognizing that there is enough existing structures that could be redeveloped. But we don't want what we don't want is someone to come in with a proposal for a giant carriage house that's brand new
Yeah.
to try to get, a 3-car garage and an ADU. That's
Right.
that's not what we're trying to do. We're
Right.
trying to make it
Okay.
easier for
Right. No,
existing.
I just need to understand that because looking at ADUs in other states, they do allow a new construction ADU attached to the single home on the lot. In some state, even allow up to 2 ADUs, on the same lot. So, but we're not. I'm just asking the question. So,
So to be clear, we're allowing construction of an ADU, but under this ordinance, it's attached because we want it to feel like the existing.
Yes.
But we are allowing a pathway if you have an existing garage or carriage house
Yeah.
and you want to convert it,
Right.
that's possible.
Right.
But you can't come in and build.
Build a brand new one.
And we're not allowing you to construct an ADU addition and convert a garage ADU so that there'd be
Right.
2. We are limiting it to 1.
Just one. I understand that part. The last question that I have, I'm sorry, Co-Chair. You mentioned in the draft talked about the 10 years.
Oh, sure. An accessory dwelling unit is a separate subordinate living area constructed as part of an existing or newly constructed owner-occupied single-family structure, built in a manner which maintains the appearance of a single-family structure. Then there's a subset. The accessory dwelling unit may be in a detached accessory structure that exists as the adoption of this ordinance or which has been in existence for at least 10 years and complies with section 4.3.54 and section 4.4.
Right.
So what that means essentially is if there's an existing, this is why I'm an advocate that zoning should take 10 minutes in a high school diploma to read because it's very complicated, but basically what it's saying is that a detached accessory structure could be converted for an ADU if that detached accessory dwelling unit is legal. And that means it either complies with our existing accessory
Okay.
structure requirements, which are in 2 different places, in our special rules section, and then also in our accessory structure section. But that 10 years actually codifies state law. So basically, if you build something and it's not zoning compliant and the city never knows about it and we never enforce on it, it's automatically grandfathered in after 10 years. So if you have a detached garage was built in, so I'll just use this current zoning was 2004. So say you built a detached garage in 2005 and it does not meet the 16-foot height requirement. It's now 2023, it's been 10 years. The city has lost its right to enforce against that violation.
Okay.
But we would also not
Allowed to convert.
not allow you to move forward and apply for an ADU. And that's essentially because since 2004, there could have been 3 different property owners. So we don't want to punish property owners now for a property that may not be per the zoning code, but it is technically legal because
Yes.
of the time. And so that's what that 10 years means.
Right. My last, well, I promised the last, but this would be the last one. Is there an exemption, not exemption, we call amnesty for someone who has a single home and has an ADU, for their parent, they've done it, everything like the way it's supposed to be. Is there an amnesty in this draft to allow that to be, permanent, legal, so it will benefit both the homeowner and the city?
That's an interesting question. So we do not have an ADU ordinance by right. We allow ADUs by special permit in the USF. So we haven't had one since I've worked for the city, which has been almost a decade. So,
Right.
but there could be special permits on file. So there could be legally compliant, special permit obtained ADUs in the city. This would not impact that. There is a number of homes within the city that have quote unquote an in-law apartment, and they have their own special code with the assessor's office. Barring that they didn't build it within the last 8 to 10 years, they'd be okay.
Okay.
If they built it in the last 8 to 10 years and came forward wanting to make it a legal ADU, staff would have to review it in conjunction with the building commissioner to make a determination that, zoning is met, life safety measures are met. And there would be a risk if someone built an ADU 8 to 10 years ago, and actually 0 to 10 years ago, without the privilege of a permit, may be required to go get variances or some other relief to make sure that, so no, we are not granting amnesty, I guess, to answer your question.
Okay, that's in long answer. So let me turn it to my co-chair, Councilor Drinkwater.
So I think at this time, given that everyone has had a chance to speak, and we will go back to any committee members and members of the council before the end of the meeting, we did want to take this juncture to open it up to members of the public. Before doing so, just wanted to mention that we have been joined in the chamber by Councilors Janess and Councilor Robinson. Can I just take a quick poll, because we want to try to give everybody as much time as possible to speak while also ensuring that everyone has time to speak. Can I just get a quick show of hands for those in the chamber who does wish to speak on this issue?
I guess that's obvious as I'm sitting.
And, okay, and Mr. Clerk, I think we have a couple of people on Zoom.
There are 2 on Zoom as well.
Okay. I am just going to keep time, and I will just sort of, I'll ask everyone to keep their remarks to 3 minutes, just to ensure that everyone has time to speak. Don't take offense if I just kind of flash my stopwatch at you.
A little flexibility.
It's just to give you, yeah, when you're nearing the time, I'm just going to flash it so you know to kind of wrap it up. 3 minutes per person. We're going to stick to the rules. Okay. When you get to the podium, I ask that you please state your name and address for the record. And there's also a piece of paper there. I just ask that you also record it for the record.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Jerry Frechette. I live at 80 Dunbar Ave, and I also serve as the vice chair of the planning board in the city of Lowell. Mr. Chairman, after the last meeting, the subcommittee meeting, I received several phone calls and actually visits at my house, and I reached out to people, and it became very, very clear to me that people were confused about this issue. And what I'd like to do is bring some clarity to the issue, because it's very, very important. This affects every homeowner that owns a single-family home in the city of Lowell. Arguably the largest widespread potential zoning change ordinance that we've enacted in my lifetime, Mr. Chairman. And currently, as this draft is written, it allows for apartments to be leased out, rented for income in your home. That's what we're talking about. These should be called apartment dwelling units as an accessory use. That's what we're talking about right now. And I'm partly to blame, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, I went into the weeds as well. And even when you look under the purpose, this is industry speak here as far as add diversity of housing options, enable aging in place, efficient use of housing. But this is also industry speak as well on material on this. An ADU can provide rental income to homeowners. ADUs are a practical option for tenants seeking small, affordable price rental homes. In a survey from AARP, adults age 18 and older who would consider creating an ADU said that they would do so in order to, and 63% said, earn extra income from renting to a tenant. This is what we're talking about in our single-family zones. So it does get lost in the weeds. I think there's constituents that want to build an in-law apartment, and we start talking about, well, we can do that with ADUs. But this is what ADUs are. Mr. Chairman, if we could, a little participation and could support me here, would you acknowledge that's what we're talking about at the moment?
If you're looking for a response, I mean, I would acknowledge that I envision this ordinance to include additional units to be rented to tenants.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, and I just...
Yes, and I have been clear
Yeah, well,
about
I
that.
don't think, see, the discussion goes into the weeds, and we talk about ADUs, and we talk about the specifics, but I can tell you right now, and what you've heard from is the housing coalition that's been cheered by nonprofits that are moving this forward. They're housing advocates, and I understand that. And then there's been councils that have heard from constituents that want to build either over a garage to have their son, and I understand that. But what's gotten lost in all this discussion is this is to basically in every single family zone. Now it hasn't been determined whether it's be in the council you were asking, whether it be in the traditional single family. So I think that's very important, and I would just add, Mr. Chairman, both of you, that this was published in the Salem News in March when Beverly was looking at this ordinance, okay? And it said, this was actually what was written. The city will hold an online public forum next week to talk about ways to allow homeowners to add accessory dwelling units in their house. The next paragraph, the ADUs as they are called could be apartments in a home's basement or above a garage or even new small building on a homeowner's property, depending on how new rules are crafted according to officials. So we've already gone to a draft ordinance, Mr. Chairman, to discuss. My concern is we're moving way too quickly on this, and I think people don't understand what we're talking about at the moment, and it's too important for that to happen. So I just ask that we really have to work on a campaign for outreach, education, clarity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Mashet. Thank you.
If any member of the public wishes to speak, you can just walk up to the podium and identify yourself. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tom Flynn, 39 Waterford Street, Lowell. A 40-page report dated 7/28/2020 proposed zoning changes to increase housing availability in Lowell. The report states, quote, most of Pawtucketville and Belvedere, as well as the majority of the Highlands and Centralville neighborhoods, only permit single-family homes. Many residents value single-family homes for their added privacy, the opportunity to have a larger yard and more space. However, restricting extensive areas to only single-family homes blocks the incremental increases in intensity that have occurred over the nearly 10,000 years of urban history, end quote. You heard that correctly, 10,000 years. That goes back even before my time. In the U.S., single-family homes make up 62% of the housing stock. In Massachusetts, it's 76%, and in Lowell, it's only around 30%. This report targets single-family homes for many changes, including ADUs. Is a single-family with an ADU still a single family? You can't have it both ways, can you? During last year's city council election, I was told it is just a report. It is not just a report anymore. The ADU fad has come to Lowell and is on the fast track to run through your neighborhood. During the last city council election, there was excitement about preserving Raleigh's farmland as green space, keeping that country feel and preventing an extra 80 some odd homes or 200 condos from being built. Now, during the summer, the push is on to have ADUs increase the rental space available in the city. Is this expected to provide more affordable housing? From what I have read, ADUs do not make a dent in affordable housing. The draft ADU zoning ordinance raises many concerns. For example, either the original dwelling or the ADU must be owner-occupied, which I like. However, Lowell just had a court case regarding whether one elected official was actually a resident of Lowell. I just have one more paragraph. I'd like Jerry's time. How many court cases will owner-occupied bring? If not owner-occupied, developers will have, as of right, a field day. My question to the council is, are we trying to preserve green space, or are we eliminating green space with ADUs on single-family properties? You can't have it both ways, can you?
Thank you. Any other members of the public in the chamber wishing to speak? Seeing none at this time, want to briefly, I know we have two speakers on Zoom. Thankfully, we should have enough time to get to them. Want to, at this point, I know, turn it to Councilor Gettier and any other councilors who wish to jump in at this time. Councilor Gettier.
Thank you, Councilor Drinkwater. You know, as you look at this, it's apparent when you listen to speakers like Mr. Flynn and also Mr. Fischette, and Mr. Flynn's not right. Government has been talking out of both sides of its mouth since the invention of government. We're sitting here and we look at heat indexes. It's going up, and we're watching everything going up. And in the areas that the heat index was not at its highest, now we want to allow building. And the only way you can allow building right now, with the materials up and the cost up, is to increase rental somewhere. There's no affordable anything. We're all just kidding ourselves. It's not affordable to build right now. When I look at my neighborhood, I watched a house be built between two historic houses, and the neighborhood was not happy at all. And when I look at the whole thing and I look, and it says right in the draft, to encourage the efficient use of city housing supply while preserving the character of the city's neighborhood. That's a complete lie. Can't happen. Can't happen. One car, it says in here. We already have parking issues. We have every issue in the world. And before we look at anything, I think this government body has to start looking at our sewer overflows. Oh, we forgot about those. When you add people in, has nothing to do with sewage going to wastewater, that we're already being reprimanded by EPA on. I get it. Oh, we're going to just disregard that. And we're going to disregard the trash that we can't pick up right now because we don't really have a good trash compactor, and we're seeing rats in our neighborhoods. We're just going to disregard all that, and let's talk about redoing more and more and more. You can't add more to your mouth when it's full. And Mr. Fischett hits it right on the head. I would love to see how many people went to the zoning board and were turned away that wanted to do something like this. This is a rental hit, and there's no question when we look at this that people are standing up here from nonprofits who are making large money off of affordable housing. And they don't even live in the city. They sit here and they tell you how much you need to save everybody else while they drive out to the suburbs and they live in a nice area, and then they come back and do the same thing. When is enough enough when we start looking at our neighborhoods and trying to build back the character that we once had in them and start trying to give people a quality of life that we had? We can't do that right now. You go behind houses, you see people who throw trash out there because they can't fit it in the one barrel they have. It's all over the place. We don't have enough inspectors to inspect anything. We call there and call there and call there, and we don't enforce anything. But we're going to add more. We have to commit as a council to commit to what we currently have before we start adding more. And when we do that well, then we should start adding more. We're not going to save the world in Lowell. We can start, but we're not going to save the world in Lowell. We need help from the suburbs. We need help from other people, and we're not getting it. And now we're saying, okay, let's add rentals to everybody's neighborhood. I can tell you right now, I'll move out of this city if my next door neighbor puts on an affordable housing unit, an ADU, and maybe that's a way to get me out of the city. Call my next door neighbor and build an ADU. I bought my house because I like it. I like the character. We bought the house because it has historical value in that neighborhood. And now we're just saying to the residents, you know what? Your neighbor can do what they want. And we bought it because of the zoning laws that are in this city. We bought it because we send people to them. My question to you, Mr. Chairman Drinkwater, through you to Christine McCall, how many people have actually gone to the zoning board in the last 10 years and been turned away for trying to do something similar to what this policy is putting forward for us to look at?
Ms. McCall.
Thank you. Through you to Councilor Getchier. We would have to get a report, but to answer your question simply, there is not a pathway to ask for this through the zoning board. We don't grant use variances.
Okay, so how many people went to put an in-law on their home that got turned away that met all these qualifications, an in-law? Or any other, how many people get turned away for trying to put together exactly what we're looking at in some shape or form?
I think I've mentioned to the council before, we don't track requests necessarily, we track permits, but anecdotally, I can speak from my own experience, the planning staff, and I think the building commissioner, we turn a number of people away all the time because there is not a pathway. Staff tries really hard to work with people to come up with a solution, but I would say folks looking to build additions get denied quite often. And that's not even an ADU, someone just could be looking for a large addition on their house. We tell people no all of the time. And that's standard operating procedure in the permitting office.
Well, there are unreasonable requests that go forward. We're sitting between this policy here. I'm not talking about unreasonable requests. Reasonable requests that went to the zoning board under our current zoning thing. We don't even track that. Why wouldn't we track that? If someone puts in an application or something and doesn't get it, we don't even have a tracking system that would track that in 2022. We don't know that. We don't have that answer. That's the problem with this city, is we don't track any stats of anything. And then we just come out and we put policies forward and we say, okay, yeah, this is what I do every day, but we don't track anything that goes before a board or anything like that. And I think that statistics and numbers state progress, or they state failures in a system. And we don't have that at the simplest level with going back to equipment in the city, from our CSOs that we're having in our wastewater system, and we want to add more infrastructure. We have an heat index that's through the roof we're looking at. When you start building things, you're cutting things down. You're taking more green space. We're adding more water to the sewer system. We're taking water away from our impervious pavements areas. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And when we look at this, maybe we should look at the zoning and see if there's a way that we can create something that would work better to help people. But to look at just sending something like this through, I would not be in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCall, did you have?
Yeah, I just
anything
wanted to
add?
clarify. We do track permits that we approve and deny. We have tracked what's gotten approved in front of the boards. One of the services that Development Services provides is guidance and advice from professional staff before someone makes an investment in designs and engineering plans. That is what we don't track. And that is an administrative burden. And if the council is willing to work with us so that we could track data like that better, that's not through our permitting system, the DPD would be open to it. I just wanted to clarify that.
I wasn't the one who said you didn't track it. That came from you, not from me. So I just followed up on a statement you said when you said you didn't track it.
Then-
I would welcome you tracking everything. I have no problem with that. But when we put something that's going to change the life of many residents, I think that we have to do our due diligence through and not just sit. And I think we are. But I do think that, as written, there is no way I could support anything like that. I know what these neighborhoods go through. I get the phone calls every day, as well as all the councilors do. And we try to, say, okay, why wasn't this put done? Why wasn't that done? And this will just add to that problem.
Thank you, Councilor. Being aware of the time, I know we have two speakers who have been waiting on Zoom. Want to make sure we get to them. Just want to remind the speakers of the 3-minute limit that many of our speakers have blown past. I got to keep these speakers strictly to the 3 minutes. Mr. Clerk, could you please recognize the speakers who have
Pat Fondell.
Yes, thank you. I'm Pat Vondel, and I live in Pawtucketville. I'm curious about the connection between the proposed zoning change in order to permit ADUs and the City of Lowell's affordable housing crisis. For some time now, government has stressed the need for evidence-based decision-making to inform policies, laws, and regulations. And that's why I'm asking if the city has data that demonstrate this approach for ADUs and the zoning charges required will reduce the proportion of city renters that are rent burdened. We do have data that show at least 20% of Lowell's population lives under the poverty line. Over 55% are rent burdened. The most rent burdened of all are our city's Black and brown residents. CTI data show affordable housing is a #1 problem cited by Lowell's poor citizen. Paying rent comes at the expense of paying other bills, healthcare, nutritious food. Is this situation sustainable? This population is not resilient by any measures, and I submit that if not addressed, this makes the city less resilient. There are no data, no studies showing ADUs actually make any difference in lowering rents and creating more affordable housing at the scale needed. Yes, they add to housing choice, but choice for who? The draft ordinance, we've gone through that, so I won't repeat it. But nowhere does this draft state that one of its purposes is to address the serious situation of our many citizens that are overly burdened by high rents. I can only conclude that this is not the purpose of the proposed zoning changes. Cities that are serious about addressing their affordable housing crises, they develop comprehensive programs with multiple strategies. And because this is a nationwide crisis, you can easily find many strategies online, and by engaging in discussion with other cities, we can learn from each other. And so please tell me in closing, what do the Housing Committee and Zoning Subcommittee see as the link between zoning changes for ADUs and Lowell's affordable housing crisis? What problem does this draft ordinance address? And it is the right one that we should be focusing on. Are we elevating housing choice at the expense of creating affordable housing? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deb Forgione.
Okay, good evening. So I think I get 3 minutes, but what I I have so many things to say. And I have spoke to John Drinkwater about this 60 minutes before a city council meeting is no way to be discussing a sweeping zoning change. In the past, we as a city have given citizens more respect and time. I've been to meetings like on a Monday night or a Wednesday night, 5 to 7, where we don't feel that we're rushed to try to get our our voice across. I just think the way that it's being handled needs to be more agreeable with the citizens. And especially at 5:30, people are having dinner with their families. It's 1 hour before a city council meeting, convenient for the city councilors, not so much for the residents. And that leads me into what I want to talk about next. I did a survey on Nextdoor, and I asked people if they knew what an ADU was. 55% of the people do not know what an ADU is. You've got to change the dialogue, and you have to be clear. You were talking about apartments. With that said, if 55% of the people don't even know what it is, how can you make a sweeping zoning change and have these discussions when you haven't even done an outreach and explain to people what it is? And then follow up on that, the people that it's going to affect the most are the single family homeowners. 30% of the housing is single family, and we're not rich. When I heard like that you wanted to like keep it at 1,000, my house is 1,000 square feet. You're talking about an ADU the size of my house. So what I'm asking is the city council has an obligation to be transparent, notify all the residents who own a single family home that there is a zoning ordinance that will allow apartments to be added to all their homes in the single family neighborhood. This will impact residents who own in a single family neighborhood. These residents and citizens represent 30% of the housing we have in Lowell. They need to be notified. Do it by mail, do it in their tax bill. You all ran for office. You know how to get the message out. You know you can let people know what's going on. And a lot of people have no idea what you're doing about the draft. And the way that the draft came out, there wasn't any public input. And even right now, it's like going on 6:30. Everybody's rushing to be done with it so you can get to your meeting. It's just not the way to handle something like this. But I have said that before. And the last thing is the city has one zoning officer for inspections and enforcement. Our budget has already been approved with over a 5% increase. Will you add another position or just have the department do more work? And will these units, and there'll be rental units in single family homes, so now you have two families, so it really is a two family, will they be required to obtain a rental permit? Thank you. Did I make it under 3 minutes?
3 minutes and 15 seconds, actually. I want to recognize Councilor Robinson.
Thank you. I personally feel this is a great discussion. This is something different citywide. Some neighborhoods haven't been exposed to any of this stuff in the past. My district has, as recent as yesterday. We looked at changes to zoning when it came to renovation of schools. We see all kind of variances being approved. We're told micro units are the future. There is a housing crunch. ADUs are being considered here with owners, primary residents on the parcel. We're not talking about 19 units stuffed into a building made for 6, where the person lives in another state and they're collecting rents. I think there's definitely an opportunity to bring people to the table and find something that's middle ground, a compromise on both ends, with the goal of increasing housing stock. We're talking about, do we want to make these ADUs and rental properties legal? Because they already exist illegally. And if you're going to sit there and deny that fact, you'd be foolish. We have illegal rental properties currently scattered throughout our city because of the housing crisis. So this is an opportunity, I think. Again, both sides need to come to the table and find that common ground. We all are in agreement. We need to increase housing inventory, but how do we do that? Slowly, methodically, well thought out, well planned, and again, with input from all members of our community. I'm not quick to turn yay or nay on this situation yet, but I'm glad that we're having these conversations. And again, I've seen variances issue. I hear people that are in charge of boards and on boards that are approving variances to stuff micro units into properties time and time again. Variances when it comes to parking on street, to satisfy profit margins of developers time and time again. But now this is a discussion that potentially could impact their backyard, and the stories are different. That's not the way the community works. I think this is definitely a great conversation to continue. I don't think we're anywhere near finding the perfect solution to this, but I'd like to thank everybody for at least offering input, and I look forward to the next conversation. And I agree. I think we need to get the word out and do a little bit more outreach and inform more members of the community that these are the discussions we're having. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And if I could just close with a couple comments. For those who have questioned the process, this was one meeting in what we expect to be more meetings on this topic. I expect in a couple minutes to request a motion to continue this meeting so this discussion can continue at a future date. I do want to point out that we've had a number of meetings on this topic, not only this session, but going back to last session at the City Council and sessions dating back before that, before I was present. We've heard from some of the same people upwards of 6, 7 different times, making a lot of the same points over and over and over. And I will state that in my own observation, it is overwhelmingly homeowners from single-family neighborhoods. One of the reasons that I know I wanted to bring this issue forward was because of the documented shortage of housing that we have in the city that is leading to a crisis of affordability. Here in this city, 60% of residents rent. And I want to repeat that because in this chamber and often in our email inboxes and our phones, we hear from those who own their homes. That's just the way it goes. But 60% of the residents in the city who we represent rent. Of those 60%, 55% are rent burdened, meaning they're paying more than a third of their income in rent, more than is reasonably recommended that you should pay for your housing. People are struggling out there because the shortage of housing stock is causing an upsurge in prices. And that, more than just about anything else that comes out of their pockets, is really hitting our residents in their wallets and pocketbooks. So this is something, and it was brought up tonight, well, this won't solve the crisis. No, it certainly is not a panacea. It's certainly not going to solve the crisis. But this is one of the reasons we're starting here is this is one incremental step that we can take that will add some additional housing to the city, and that by virtue of its size and its character tends to be affordable. Now, this might be something that is offered to families, seniors who are looking to downsize and allow growing families to take over the primary dwellings. It could be, yes, offered to renters in what are now our traditional single-family neighborhoods. What I'm not willing to do or to say is that our single-family neighborhoods are full. We can't do that. We have, cities must grow. We're not providing enough housing here in the city for the people who live here and the people who want to live here. So will an ordinance that allows accessory dwelling units solve the housing affordability crisis in the city of Lowell? No. We have to have a multifaceted approach to provide housing at the level that the residents of the city and the people who want to live here need. This is one thing that will help. And yes, it does ask for housing to be added in our single-family neighborhoods. We can't put this all on our two-family and multifamily neighborhoods because 2/3 of the buildable land in the city of Lowell is in single-family zoned neighborhoods. So we can't just put a sign out saying that those neighborhoods are full. We have to find incremental ways for our single-family neighborhoods to pull their weight, along with other neighborhoods to add the housing stock that our residents need. So I just wanted to add those comments that there's a reason for this. I'm glad we're considering things like heat islands and things like that, but I also want to make sure that we're creating additional housing opportunities in neighborhoods that actually have tree canopy and tree cover, and not forcing those residents who currently have to rent to live in neighborhoods that currently don't have tree canopy, and they are suffering from heat-related health effects and things like that. So I think it's important that we look at many different incremental changes that we need to add housing, and this is one step in the process. I want to reiterate that this conversation will continue. Nothing is being rushed. We are not asking for any votes this evening, other than to continue this meeting. We can meet on Tuesdays, we can meet on Wednesdays, we can meet any day of the week, and we will have those discussions when it is most opportune for this joint subcommittee to continue the conversation. And we will continue this discussion. So at this juncture, I apologize, I have pushed us over the 6:30 limit, so at this time, I will ask for a motion to continue this meeting to a later date.
So move. So, I second. Okay.
Motion has been moved and seconded to continue the meeting. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. The ayes have, those saying opposed say no. The ayes have it. Motion is continued to a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My wife timed me. She said I went over 3 minutes. She sent me a text.